Hi students, good morning. So my name is Fanindra and I am lecturer in physics working in Vigyan institutions. So let us start a new chapter in our first year of physics, that is gravitation. A very most important chapter, gravitation. So in this chapter, let us see what are the contents that are to be discussed overall in this chapter. So the main contents of this chapter are as follows. There are Kepler's laws, what is meant by universal law of gravitation and the gravitational constant, acceleration due to gravity on the surface of the earth, and what happens to this acceleration of the gravity if we move above from the surface of the earth and below the surface of the earth, gravitational potential energy, and escape speed. What is the speed required to escape from the surface or the atmosphere of the earth, and orbital velocity or the orbital speed, and an earth satellite. For an earth satellite we will calculate what is the orbital velocity, and energy of the orbiting satellites, geostationary satellites and polar satellites, and what is meant by weightlessness. So these are the contents that we will discuss in this chapter. Okay, so the first topic is Kepler's laws. To study or to know about the gravitation, first we need to know what is meant by planetary motion. To know that the planetary motion of the planets, we want to learn about this Kepler's laws. So Kepler's laws, first law. Kepler's first law is law of orbits. According to the law of orbits, all the planets revolve around the sun in an elliptical orbits with the sun located at one of the foci of the ellipse. So the statement is all the planets revolve around the sun in an elliptical orbits. So you can see here this is an ellipse. So the planet is revolving around the ellipse. So here the planet is revolving around this elliptical orbits. For an ellipse there are two foci. So this is focus 1 and focus 2. So the sun is located at one of the foci. So this is the Kepler's first law. So from the Kepler's first law, we will know about where the velocity of the planet will be more and where the velocity of the planet will be less. So okay students, from Kepler's first law, that is all the planets revolve around the sun in an elliptical orbit. So this is an elliptical orbit. So the planet will be revolving around in this elliptical orbits with a sun located at one of the foci. So there are 2 points. These are the 2 foci. So sun is located at this foci F1. Then we call this point A as perihelion, which is the shortest distance or the shortest point of the planet from the sun, and the largest point from the sun to the planet is called aphelion. Okay, now the distance between the sun and the closest approach. So A is the closest approach of the planet, and distance between the sun and the closest approach to the sun at the point F1 is this one. AS is called as perigee. This AS is nothing but AS is equal to here total. So this one is the minor axis and this is the major axis. So part of this is the semi-major axis, which is nothing but the A, and this one is AE. Okay, E is nothing but eccentricity. We know how to calculate the eccentricity from our mathematics. So as this total distance is A and this one is AE, the distance AS is nothing but, if let us consider this point as O, so AS is nothing but AO minus SO, right, which is equal to AO is nothing but A and minus SO is nothing but AE, which is equal to A into 1 minus E. A is the length of the semi-major axis and E is the eccentricity. Then perigee can be divided by and the distance, which means the distance of the closest approach is nothing but A into 1 minus E is the distance of closest approach, which we called as perigee, or the distance from the sun to a point which we call it as perihelion. Similarly, the distance of greatest approach, which means the planet located at perihelion is the farthest from the sun, point which is farthest from the sun. So the distance from farthest distance from the sun is, we call it as apogee, which can be given by, so apogee is nothing but BS. So from here we can write BS is equal to BO plus SO, which can be equal to BO is nothing but A plus SO is nothing but AE, which is equal to A into 1 plus E, is the farthest distance from the sun. In this manner, we can calculate what is the farthest distance and what is the closest distance, which we called as perigee and apogee. Right. Okay, students, now let us move on to the next law, that is Kepler's second law, which is a law of areas. So, which gives us the line joining the planet to the sun sweeps out equal areas in equal intervals of time. So, you can see here in the animation. So, here the planet is revolving around the sun in an elliptical orbit, right? So, here the planet is revolving around the sun in an elliptical orbit. So, you can see for a time t1 the planet covers let the area be A1 as it covers this part of the area as A1 in one day. In same one day, the planet covers a distance from this point to this point of area A2. According to Kepler's second law, that is law of areas, here the area A1 is equal to area A2. So the line joining the planet to the sun sweeps out equal area in equal interval of time. So if these two time intervals are equal, then these areas must be equal. That means if a planet moves a distance from here to here covering an area of A1, say in a time interval t1, which is equal for 1 month 30 days, again from in other position from here to here, let it covers an area of A2 in the same time interval, for that is a period of 30 days. So here the two time periods are equal, then the area should also be equal, right? So that is the statement of the Kepler's second law, that is law of areas. The line joining the planet to the sun sweeps out equal areas in equal time interval. If time interval is equal, then the areas will also be equal. Okay, so let us derive this law of areas in a mathematical manner. So from the law of areas, we can say that the areal velocity of a radius vector remains constant. Areal velocity of a radius vector remains constant. For that, consider a planet which is revolving around a sun in an elliptical orbit in this manner. So let it be the major axis and this one is the minor axis. So this is the one of the foci F1 where sun is present, and this is the another foci F2. So here the sun is present, and let us consider a planet is moving in this position from this position to this position in a time interval of t1 or a time interval of t. So the line joining the sun to the planet sweeps equal areas in equal interval of time. So let us consider another time. So here for the same time t, the planet will move from this position to this position. So according to Kepler's second law, these two areas should be equal, which means area should remain constant with respect to time. Let us derive the same. For that, so let us, sun makes an angle theta here. For another angle d theta, let it cover an area of dA. Let it cover an area of dA in a time interval of dt. For an angle of d theta, let it cover an area of dA in a small time interval of d theta. Right. So as it is in the form of a approximately equal to a triangle, we know that the area formula dA is equal to half into base into height. Base is nothing but the radius, which is r, into height. So we need to calculate this one. It is nothing but the arc length. So for smaller angles, we know that angle is equal to arc length by radius. Angle is equal to arc length by radius. So from which arc length is equal to angle into radius, which is equal to angle is nothing but d theta into radius r. So here height can be written as d theta into r, from which we can write it as half into r square into d theta is nothing but d. Right? So if you multiply with 1 by d theta in both sides, we can write this equation as dA by dt is equal to half r square into d theta by dt. Right? Here d theta by dt. So here is the theta is nothing but the angular displacement, as it is performing a rotational motion. It is d theta is nothing but the angular displacement. So from which d theta by dt can be written as angular velocity. Rate of change of angular displacement is nothing but the angular velocity omega. So dA by dt is equal to half into r square into omega. Right? From the chapter rotational motion, we know that the relation between the linear velocity and the angular velocity, which can be v is equal to r omega. So substituting here, we can write this equation dA by dt is equal to half r into r omega, which can be written as v. Right? Similarly, we know that the angular momentum L is equal to mvr, from which v into r can be L by m, from which this equation can be written as dA by dt is equal to L by 2m, as angular momentum is a vector quantity and area is also a vector quantity. dA by dt is nothing but L bar by 2m. According to law of conservation of angular momentum, as there is no external torque acting on this system, the total angular momentum should remain constant. Therefore, L is the angular momentum, remains constant. Mass m is the mass of the planet, remains constant. So as L bar is constant, according to law of conservation of angular momentum, dA bar by dt should be constant. Therefore, radius velocity or areal velocity of a radius vector is always remains constant. As areal velocity dA bar by dt is constant, so areal velocity of a radius vector remains constant. Okay, students, now let us calculate what is the velocity at perihelion and epihelion. Right? So let us see this. Let Vp and Va are the magnitude of the velocities of the planet at perihelion. So at this point the velocity is Vp, and at this point, that is the epihelion, the velocity is, let us consider the magnitude of velocity is Va, and S denotes the position of the sun. So Sp S into SP is not at the closest approach. So this SP, let it be equal to RA, and the S into A. SA is the farthest distance, that is apogee, which is nothing but RB. It is given as RB, and M is the mass of the planet. Okay, now according to law of conservation of angular momentum, law of conservation of angular momentum. So what is statement of the law of conservation of angular momentum? If there is no external torque acting on the system, then the total angular momentum remains constant. As we know that in this system, as there is no external torque is acting, so angular momentum at the point of epihelion is equal to angular momentum at the point of perihelion. So at the point of epihelion is nothing but the mass, or we can write it as angular momentum at point A is equal to angular momentum at point B. Angular momentum formula is nothing but mvr. So m into v, velocity at A, velocity at epihelion is A, and radius of the point position from S to epihelion, it is given as B. Okay, or let us consider it as RA. Distance to farthest distance, or the distance from the sun to the epihelion, is nothing but the RA, which is equal to at perihelion mass into velocity at point P, Vp, velocity at perihelion, and distance of closest approach, let it be Rp. Okay, here as the m remains constant, m can be get cancelled. So Va into Ra is equal to Vp into Rp. Right? So Va by Vp is equal to Rp by Ra. What is Rp and Ra? Rp is nothing but the distance of closest approach, and Ra is the distance of farthest approach. So as Ra is greater than Rp, Va must be less than Vp. So as Ra is greater, Ra is nothing but the distance of the sun from sun to the epihelion. So as this is greater, so at this point velocity should be less. So at here, that is at the epihelion, velocity should be less. Whereas at the point of perihelion, velocity will be high. Velocity will be high. So distance is small, velocity will be high. Here distance is more, velocity will be less. Okay, now how to calculate these velocities? So to calculate these velocities, we need to consider the law of conservation of mechanical energy, which gives as a potential energy plus kinetic energy is equal to total energy. Right? Potential energy is nothing but minus G into capital M. That is the mass of this one, and the small m is the mass of the planet divided by radius r, plus kinetic energy is nothing but half m v square, which is equal to total energy is nothing but G capital M small m by 2 into A. Okay, so from this, if we calculate, if we redact, we can get the formulas. A velocity of perihelion Vp is equal to root over G capital M by Vp is nothing but velocity of the perihelion. So A into 1 minus E into 1 plus E. Similarly, velocity of at a point epihelion, velocity at point epihelion, which is less, is equal to root over Gm by A into 1 plus e into 1 minus e. In this manner, we can calculate the velocity at perihelion and velocity at epihelion. So these are the formulas to calculate the velocities for a planet revolving around a sun of mass m, and g is the universal gravitational constant, which we will study in later. And how we write this potential energy formula and total energy formulas will be studied in our later classes. So these are the formulas regarding the velocity at the point of perihelion and velocity at epihelion, right? Okay students, now let us move on to the next one, that is Kepler's third law, which is the law of periods. So it states that the square of the time period of revolution of a planet is directly proportional to the cube of semi-major axis of the ellipse traced out by the planet. Suppose, so from the first laws, we know that all the planets revolve around the sun in an elliptical orbits. So this is the major axis and this is the minor axis. So the length of the semi-major axis, let it be the A, and let is the focus at which sun is present, and the planet P is revolving around the sun, right? According to the third law, Kepler's third law, that is the law of periods, the square of the time period, so time period, time taken by the planet to revolve one revolution, let it be the t, the square of the time period, which is t square, is directly proportional to the cube of semi-major axis. Length of the semi-major axis is a, so which is a cube. So t square is directly proportional to a cube, right? So let us derive this one. So whenever a planet is revolving around the sun, so when it is in revolution, there are two forces acting. So gravitational force between the sun and the planet, and also as the planet is in rotatory motion, there is a centripetal force. So both the forces should be equal. So here the centripetal force should be equal to the gravitational force. So formula for this centripetal force is nothing but mv square by r, right, which is equal to gravitational force. It is nothing but g capital M small m by r square, right? Here m gets cancelled, r square gets cancelled. Here v square is equal to gm by r, right? We know that velocity v in terms of time period, v is equal to 2 pi r by t. So substituting here, 2 pi r by t whole square is equal to gm by r square, which means 4 pi square r square by t square is equal to gm by r, here gm by r. So by cross multiplying, we can get this equation as 4 pi square r cube is equal to gm into t square, from which t square can be written as 4 pi square divided by gm into r cube. As 4 is constant and pi square is constant, g is universal gravitational constant, and m is the mass of the sun, which remains constant. So this total value will be constant. Therefore t square is directly proportional to the r cube. R cube is nothing but the semi-major axis. So t square is directly proportional to a cube. So this is the formula for Kepler's third law, that is law of period. The square of the time period of revolution of a planet is directly proportional to the cube of semi-major axis, right? So these are the three Kepler's laws which we need to learn to follow the gravitation chapter. First one, Kepler's first law gives the law of the planets, which states that all the planets revolve around the sun in an elliptical orbits with sun located at one of the foci. Next one is law of areas, which gives the aerial velocity remains constant, which means if the line joining the planet to the sun sweeps equal areas in equal intervals of time, And the third one is law of periods, which gives us the square of the time period of revolution is directly proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis. Right? So these are the three Kepler's laws. Okay, students, now let us move on to the next one, that is the universal law of gravitation. So, according to universal law of gravitation, every particle in the universe attracts every other particle with a force which is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square root of the distance between the two particles, and this force acts along the line joining the two forces. So, according to this universal law of gravitation, universal law of gravitation, every particle in the universe attracts each and every other particle. So you can see here, the earth will attract the moon, in turn moon will also attract the earth. The earth attracts a person on the earth. Similarly, the moon can also attract the person on the earth. And each and every particle in the universe will be attracted by every other particle in the universe with a force here given. With a force, the force is directly proportional to the product of their masses and is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. And this force is acts along this line joining the two masses or the two particles. Okay, now let us derive the equation for this universal law of gravitation. So let us derive the equation for the force acting between the two particles. So let us consider two particles. Let it be a particle of mass m1 and let it be another particle of mass m2, with both are separated by a distance r. Right. So according to this universal law of gravitation, the force between these two particles, the force F, is directly proportional to the product of their masses m1 into m2 and is inversely proportional to, this force is inversely proportional to, which is 1 by square of the distance between them, r square. So F is proportional to 1 by r square. So by combining these two equations, we can write it as F is proportional to m1 m2 by r square, m1 m2 by r square. By removing this proportionality, we can place some constant. So we can write it as F is equal to G m1 m2 by r square, where this G is called universal gravitational constant. Universal gravitational constant. G is called universal gravitational constant, and the value of the G will be G is equal to 6.67 into 10 power minus 11 Newton meter square per kg square. Okay, so the SI units of this universal gravitational constant, so SI units of universal gravitational constant G is equal to Newton meter square per kg square. So, and the dimensional formula will be so as it is Newton, we know that the Newton is a unit for force, which is mass into acceleration, or kg meter per second square, or ml t power minus 2. From this, all this equation we can write the dimensional formula as m power minus 1 L power 3 t power minus 2 is the dimensional formula for the universal gravitational constant m power minus 1 L cube 3 t power minus 2. Right. So this is constant, this universal gravitational constant G is constant everywhere in the universe, and the value is equal to 6.67 into 10 power minus 11 Newton meter square per kg square. Right, and it is a scalar quantity. Of course, as it is a constant, it is a scalar quantity. Now, coming to the force is written as force F is equal to G m1 m2 by r square, as this force is a vector quantity. So, force, or we can write it as gravitational force. Gravitational force between the two objects can be written as force F is equal to G m1 m2 by r square. G m1 m2 by r square, and this force, it is a vector quantity. It is a vector quantity. And it is always acts along the line joining the two planets. So, and it acts along the line joining the planets or the particles. Remember students, this distance r is from the center of mass, not from the surface. The distance between the two planets or the two particles is from the center of masses. Right, we need to calculate this r from the center of mass of the two particles. And this gravitational force is always an attractive force. It is always an attractive force. Gravitational force is always an attractive force. Right, this is regarding the gravitational force. So from the universal law of gravitation, we can write it as force is directly proportional to product of their masses and inversely proportional to square of the distance between them, from which force F is equal to G m1 m2 by r square, where G is called universal gravitational constant, whose value is 6.67 into 10 power minus 11 Newton meter square per kilogram square. Right. So if you want to define the universal gravitational constant, so it can be defined as, consider the particles whose masses is 1 unit, that means m1 m2 is equal to 1 kg, and the distance between the two particles, let it be the 1 meter. Then the force acting on the particle F is equal to 6.67 into 10 power minus 11 Newton meter square, or 10 power minus 11 newtons. Okay, so the universal gravitational constant G can be defined as the force acting between the two particles whose masses is 1 kg or 1 unit and separated by a distance of 1 unit. Then the force acting between the two particles, if it is equal to 6.67 into 10 power minus 11 newtons, is the gravitational constant. Okay students, now let us see what is the vector form of the universal law of gravitation. For that, let us consider the two particles. Let it be the A, and another particle, let it be the B, which are separated by a distance r1. Let this particle A has mass m1 and this particle mass B m2. Let r12 is the distance from A to B in this direction, r12 bar, and r21 bar is the distance from the distance vector from B to A. So r12 is the unit vector from the A to B, and r21 is the unit vector from B to A. Right. Then the gravitational force in the vector can be written as F bar is equal to minus G m1 m2 by, so the distance from force F12 mod of r12 bar square into r12 cap. Here the negative sign indicates that the gravitational force is always an attractive force. The negative sign indicates that the gravitational force is always attractive force, which means the force F12 is in this direction and force F21 bar will be in this direction. Force acting on 1 due to second can be from 2 to 1, so F12. So the negative sign indicates the gravitational force is attractive. It is a attractive force. So which we can write it as F12 bar is equal to G M1 M2 by R12 magnitude square into, we can write it as R21 cap. So as R12 and R21 are both are in opposite direction, so instead of minus we are writing R21 cap, right? So similarly, if we have a different number of particles, here we have only considered 2 particles. If you have different particles, suppose this particle of mass m, there is 3 particles in this manner, which is m1, m2 and m3. So let it be the R1, let it be the R2 and R3. Then the net force acting on this particle of mass m will be equal to force due to the first particle F1 bar plus force due to the second particle F2 bar plus force due to the third particle F3 bar. We need to write in this manner. Okay, we need to calculate it as a vector sum. Okay, in this manner we can calculate the force between the different particles. Right. Thank you.